They never discovered the cleaner had another profession until she was challenged in front of everyone. Emily Johnson held the eraser with trembling hands as the executives debated numbers in the company's most important boardroom. For 17 years, she had performed the same routine, wiping clean whiteboards after meetings that decided the fate of thousands of employees. That Tuesday morning, something different was happening. The CFO, Michael Thompson, gestured nervously at the equations on the board, while the CEO, Victoria Parker, shook her head in disapproval. The numbers weren't adding up, and the tension in the air was palpable. "We need to finalize this report today, Michael. The investors arrive tomorrow and we can't present inconsistencies," said Victoria, drumming her fingers on the mahogany table. "I've already checked everything 3 times, ma'am. The calculations are correct," replied Michael, adjusting his expensive tie with a nervous flick. Emily continued wiping the board methodically, as she always did. Her graying hair was tied in a simple bun beneath the navy blue uniform cap. The blue rubber gloves she wore to protect her hands from the cleaning solution made a soft sound as she moved the eraser. But this time something made her pause. A small line in the bottom right corner of the board caught her attention. It was an equation she recognized instantly, and there was a glaring mistake that jumped out at her like a silent alarm. Emily's heart raced. All these years, she had watched countless calculations erased by her hands, but she had never interfered. It wasn't her place. She was just the cleaner who slipped in and out of rooms unnoticed, invisible as the air they breathed. "Sorry for the delay, but I needed to review these numbers one more time," said the head accountant, Robert Miller, rushing in with a folder full of documents. "I confirmed the projection for the next quarter is—" "Wait a moment," Victoria interrupted, raising her hand. "Emily, could you hold off on wiping the board completely? We need to check one last thing." Emily nodded silently, as she always did. She was used to being treated like part of the furniture, present but never truly seen. She kept holding the eraser, watching the executives pore over printed spreadsheets and documents. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us just starting out. Now back to the story. "Look at this number here," said Michael, pointing at the board. "If we apply this formula to last semester's data, we'll see a 22% increase in net revenue." Victoria studied the numbers carefully, but something bothered her. 30 years in finance had sharpened her instinct for spotting inconsistencies, even if she couldn't put it into words. "Robert, are you absolutely sure these calculations are correct?" she asked, crossing her arms. "Absolutely, ma'am. I used the same mathematical model we've applied for the last 5 years. It's never failed us," replied Robert, wiping sweat from his brow with a handkerchief. Emily watched everything in silence, but inside a fierce battle raged in her mind. The mistake on the board was as obvious to her as a flashing red light. If the company made decisions based on those incorrect numbers, the consequences would be disastrous. She thought of her daughter, Olivia, who had just graduated with a business degree and dreamed of working at a big firm like this one. She thought of her co-workers who relied on these jobs to support their families. She thought of all the employees she greeted every day in the hallways. But she also thought about what happened 17 years ago, when she tried to do the right thing and lost everything. The pain was still fresh in her chest, like a scar that had never fully healed. "Well, if everyone agrees the numbers are correct, let's move forward," said Victoria, starting to organize her papers. "Emily, you can finish cleaning the board now." It was at that moment something inside Emily broke. She could no longer stay silent while looking at those incorrect numbers that would send the company over the edge. Her hands trembled as she glanced at the eraser, then at the board, then at the confident faces of the executives. "Excuse me," she said in a quiet but firm voice. Everyone turned to look at her, surprised. It was the first time in 17 years Emily had spoken during a meeting. The silence in the room was deafening. "There's a mistake in the calculation," she continued, pointing to the equation in the corner of the board. Michael let out a dry, disbelieving laugh. "Emily, with all due respect, but you're here to clean, not give opinions on financial math." "This number here," she said, ignoring Michael's comment and touching the board with her gloved finger. This variable is being multiplied when it should be divided. The final result is inflated by over 40%. The room fell completely silent. Robert stood abruptly and walked to the board, studying the equation Emily had pointed out. His face began to pale. "This is ridiculous," Michael said, slamming his hand on the table. "A janitor can't understand equations that specialized accountants took days to formulate." But Victoria wasn't laughing. She watched Emily with a curious expression, noticing something she'd never seen before. There was a sharp intelligence in the eyes of the woman who had cleaned their offices for so many years. "Emily," Victoria said calmly, "can you explain how you reached that conclusion?" Emily hesitated. For a moment, she considered backing down, apologizing and returning to her simple, safe life. But when she looked again at the incorrect numbers, she knew she could no longer bear the weight of staying silent. "This formula is a derivative of multiple regression analysis," she began, her voice growing steadier with each word. "When we apply the quarterly growth variable, we need to consider the depreciation rate as a divisor, not a multiplier, to avoid the overlap of positive values that distort the financial reality." Robert's jaw literally dropped. Michael stopped gesturing and stared at her as if seeing a ghost. Victoria slowly rose from her chair, her eyes fixed on Emily. "Where did you learn this?" Victoria asked, her voice a mix of surprise and respect. Emily felt a lump in her throat. Painful memories began to surface like waves on a stormy shore. She thought of all the nights she'd spent studying after exhausting cleaning shifts, keeping alive a passion that had been brutally ripped from her life. I studied math in college," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "What kind of degree?" Victoria pressed, stepping toward her. Emily took a deep breath. There was no turning back now. "A PhD in applied mathematics. I finished 20 years ago." The silence that followed was unlike anything that had ever happened in that room. It was as if time had stopped, and everyone was processing something impossible to believe. Michael was the first to react, his voice a mix of disbelief and irritation. "That's impossible. If you have a PhD, what have you been doing working as a janitor for 17 years? The question hit Emily like a knife to the chest. It was the same question she asked herself every night before bed, the same one that haunted her in her dreams. "Sometimes life doesn't go as planned," she replied, with deep sadness in her eyes. Victoria noticed there was a painful story behind those words. Her experience as a leader had taught her to recognize when someone was carrying a heavy burden. "Emily, can you show us the correction?" asked Victoria, handing her a blue marker. Emily looked at the marker for a long moment. It was as if she were staring at a door that had been closed 17 years ago. A door she had desperately tried to open again, but which seemed locked forever. With trembling hands, she removed her blue rubber gloves and took the marker. When she touched the tip to the whiteboard, she felt a familiar electricity run through her body. It was the same sensation she had when she was a university professor, when numbers danced in her mind like a perfect symphony. She began to write, and her distinctive mathematical handwriting took shape on the board. It was different from the writing of any accountant or analyst who had ever passed through that room. There was an elegance and precision that only came from years of deep academic study. "Look," she said, her voice gaining an authority she hadn't shown in nearly 2 decades. "If we apply the correction here and adjust this variable, the actual result will be approximately 15% lower than originally calculated." Robert followed each step of the correction, his eyes wide with admiration and horror at the same time. Admiration for the flawless mathematical precision, and horror at realizing he had made a mistake that could have cost the company millions. "My God," he murmured. "She's right. The mistake was right in front of me and I didn't see it." Michael, who until then had maintained a skeptical expression, began to grow nervous. If the janitor was right, it meant he had approved incorrect numbers that were about to be presented to investors. His reputation was on the line. "Wait a minute," he said, trying to keep his composure. "How do we know she's not just making this up? Anyone can write numbers on a board and look smart." Victoria looked at Michael with disapproval. Michael, can you point out any mistake in what she wrote? Michael studied the board for a few minutes, but had to admit he couldn't find any flaw in the mathematical logic Emily had presented. In fact, the correction was so obvious now that he felt ashamed for not noticing it earlier. "Emily," said Victoria, turning her attention back to her, "where did you earn your doctorate?" "New York University," Emily replied, her voice heavy with painful nostalgia. "And what was your exact specialization?" "Applied quantitative analysis in economic and financial modeling. My thesis was on investment portfolio optimization using machine learning algorithms." Robert nearly choked on his own saliva. Emily's specialization was exactly what the company needed to solve some of the most complex problems they were facing. Victoria realized she was witnessing something extraordinary, but she also sensed there was much more to Emily's story than she was revealing. "Emily, if you don't mind me asking, what happened? Why is a PhD in applied mathematics working as a janitor?" The question Emily feared most had been asked. She looked at the floor for a moment, gathering the courage to relive the most painful moments of her life. "I was a professor at NYU," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. 17 years ago, I discovered some colleagues were manipulating research data to favor companies that funded them. When I reported it, they called me a liar, jealous, a troublemaker." She paused, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "They ran a campaign to discredit me. They said I was trying to harm the university's reputation for personal reasons. In the end, they fired me for cause, citing inappropriate conduct." The room was completely silent. Everyone now understood the magnitude of the injustice Emily had suffered. "After that, no university would hire me. My reputation was ruined. I had a young daughter to raise alone and bills to pay. I took whatever work came my way," she continued, wiping away a stubborn tear. "Why did you never try to clear your name?" asked Victoria, genuinely curious. "I tried for 5 years," Emily replied, bitterness evident in her voice. "I spent all my savings on lawyers, but they had more power, more influence, more money. In the end, I had to accept that my academic career was over." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us just starting out. Now back to the story. The weight of Emily's story hung over the room like a dark cloud. Victoria felt a mix of outrage and admiration for the woman who had spent 17 years working in silence, keeping her knowledge hidden like a secret treasure. "And you never thought to use your knowledge here at the company?" Victoria asked. Emily gave a sad laugh. "Who would believe a janitor? Besides, I'd lost confidence in myself. I started doubting whether I really knew anything or if it was just luck during my academic years." "But you kept studying?" pressed Robert, fascinated by her story. "Every night," Emily admitted. "After Olivia fell asleep, I'd study. I read scientific articles online, kept up with developments in financial mathematics. It was my way of keeping alive a part of myself I thought had been buried." Michael, who had stayed quiet throughout the conversation, finally spoke. "All right. Let's say your story is true. That doesn't change the fact that you violated company confidentiality by paying attention to information that wasn't your business." Victoria shot Michael a furious look. "She saved the company from a massive mistake that could have cost millions, and you're worried about confidentiality." "I'm worried about protocols and hierarchy," Michael replied defensively. "If we start accepting janitors' opinions on corporate finance, where does it end?" "Maybe it ends in a place where we value knowledge regardless of who holds it," Victoria countered, with a firmness that made it clear the discussion was over. Emily watched the exchange with a mix of gratitude and apprehension. Part of her was happy to finally be heard, but another part feared the consequences of exposing herself this way. "Emily," Victoria said, turning to her, "you mentioned you kept studying all these years. Have you followed the changes in the US financial market?" "Yes," Emily replied with slightly more confidence. "I've tracked tax law reforms, shifts in risk analysis methods, the implementation of new financial technologies." "And what do you think about our current investment strategy?" Victoria asked, genuinely interested in her opinion. Emily hesitated. It was a chance to voice thoughts she'd kept bottled up for years, but she knew she was treading dangerous ground. "Can I be honest?" she asked. "Please. You're being too conservative in some sectors and too risky in others. The tech investment portfolio is over-leveraged, while you're neglecting obvious opportunities in renewable energy from a mathematical standpoint." Robert's jaw dropped. It was exactly the same conclusion he had reached, but he hadn't been able to express it so clearly. "Could you elaborate on this analysis?" asked Victoria. Emily looked at the board, then at the executives, then back at the board. It was as if she were facing a choice that would define the rest of her life. "I can, but I need more space to write," she said, pointing to the board already filled with equations. Victoria smiled for the first time since the meeting began. "Robert, could you ask someone to bring more mobile boards?" As Robert left to fetch the boards, Emily began cleaning the existing one. But this time she wasn't clearing away others' knowledge. She was making space for her own. "Emily," said Victoria, seizing the moment alone, "may I ask you a personal question?" "Of course. How did you keep your sanity all these years, working below your potential, being treated as invisible, keeping all this knowledge to yourself?" Emily stopped wiping the board and looked at Victoria with a thoughtful expression. "My daughter," she replied simply. "Everything I did was for her. I wanted her to have the opportunities I was denied. And how is she now?" "She graduated with a business degree last month. She's job hunting. She was always an excellent student, far better than I ever was," Emily said, maternal pride evident in her voice. "Does she know about your background?" "She does. She's the only person in the world who knows. All these years she'd see me studying late at night and ask why I didn't use my knowledge. I always told her that one day maybe the right opportunity would come." Victoria nodded, understanding the complexity of the situation. "And do you think this is the right opportunity?" Emily glanced around the room, where she had spent so many mornings silently cleaning. "I don't know, but I do know I can't stay silent anymore when I see mistakes that could hurt so many people." Robert returned with 2 assistants carrying mobile boards. Emily thanked them and began arranging her workspace like a classroom. "I'll show you a complete analysis of the company's financial position," she said, picking up a blue marker. "But I need you to understand, I'm not trying to replace anyone or cause trouble, I just want to help." For the next hour, Emily developed on the boards a financial analysis more detailed and precise than anything those executives had ever seen. She broke complex data into understandable components, identified overlooked patterns, and proposed innovative solutions to old problems. Michael, who had initially been hostile, found himself asking technical questions and taking notes. Emily's competence was undeniable, and even his wounded pride couldn't deny the quality of her work. "This model here," she said, pointing to a series of equations on the second board, "can predict market fluctuations with up to 85% accuracy based on patterns from the last 10 years. "How did you arrive at that percentage?" asked Robert, fascinated. "I tested the model using historical data from similar companies. The results were consistent in 93% of the cases analyzed." Victoria watched everything with a mix of admiration and strategy. She saw a unique opportunity for the company, but knew the situation was delicate and required careful handling. "Emily," she said when the presentation ended, "would you be willing to continue this conversation in private?" Emily looked at the executives around the table. They were all watching her with a mix of respect and curiosity she hadn't experienced in 17 years. "Yes," she replied, her voice steady for the first time in a long while. "Michael, Robert, could you give us a few minutes?" asked Victoria. When they were alone, Victoria stood up and walked to the window overlooking downtown New York City. "Emily, I'll be direct with you. The company needs someone with your expertise. Our financial analysis department is facing challenges our traditional methods can't solve." Emily felt her heart race. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting you consider a career change, back to what you truly know how to do." "Victoria, I appreciate the offer, but you don't understand. My reputation in the industry is ruined. If anyone finds out about my past..." "Your past is exactly what makes you valuable," Victoria interrupted. "You faced adversity, kept your integrity, and kept learning even when everyone said you weren't good enough. That's not a weakness, Emily, it's extraordinary strength. Emily felt tears welling up in her eyes again. But what if I'm not as good as I used to be? 17 years is a long time away from practice. What you just did in the last 60 minutes proves you haven't just maintained your skills, you've honed them. You have a perspective none of us do. What perspective? The perspective of someone who's worked at every level of the company. You know the employees, understand daily operations, and now we know you have the technical knowledge to analyze financial aspects. It's a unique combination. Emily looked out the window at the city where she'd built a life so different from the one she'd planned. What if I accept and find I can't handle the pressure? What if I fail again? What if you don't accept and spend the rest of your life wondering what if? Victoria countered gently. The question hit Emily hard. She'd spent 17 years asking herself that very thing. I need to think, she said. Of course. But Emily, I want you to know I'm not offering this out of pity or some sense of charity. I'm offering it because you're genuinely the most qualified person I've ever met to solve the problems we're facing. Emily nodded, still processing everything that had happened that morning. When she woke up, she was just the invisible cleaning lady. Now she was being offered a second chance at the career she thought she'd lost forever. Can I ask you something? Emily said. Of course. Why are you doing this? You barely know me. Victoria smiled. Because 15 years ago, when my previous company was on the brink of bankruptcy, a math consultant saved our investments with a brilliant analysis. Your mathematical handwriting and problem-solving approach remind me so much of hers. Emily's eyes widened. What was her name? Dr. Emily Johnson. The world stopped. Emily looked at Victoria with complete shock. You remember me? I do. You saved not just my company, but my career. When I heard what happened to you at the university, I was furious. I tried to find you to offer you a job, but you disappeared. Tears now streamed freely down Emily's face. I had no idea you remembered. Emily, you were one of the best professionals I ever worked with. What they did to you was a grotesque injustice, and if I'd had the chance to defend you back then, I would have. Why didn't you say anything before? All these years I've worked here? Because I wasn't sure it was you until today. You've changed so much, and I didn't want to assume. But when I saw your handwriting on the board and how you analyzed the problem, I had no more doubts. Emily sank heavily into a chair, trying to process the revelation that her current boss was someone from her professional past. Victoria, you can't imagine what this means to me, she said between sobs. I can imagine. And I want you to know I never doubted your competence or integrity. What happened to you was a scandal, and it's time to correct this injustice. At that moment, the door opened, and Michael entered hesitantly. Sorry to interrupt, but there's a young woman at reception asking for Emily. She says she's her daughter and needs to speak urgently. Emily stood quickly, wiping her tears. It's Olivia. Something must have happened. You can bring her in, Victoria said. A few minutes later, Olivia Johnson entered the room. She was a 23-year-old woman with dark hair and sharp eyes that strongly resembled her mother's. She glanced around, noticing the boards filled with equations and her mother without her cleaning uniform. Mom, what's going on here? She asked, confused. Emily looked at her daughter, then at Victoria, then back at Olivia. Sweetheart, remember when you always asked me why I didn't use my math skills? I do. Well, today I did. Olivia looked at the boards, immediately recognizing the kind of analysis her mother had done at home during late nights. Mom, you did all this? I did. Olivia stepped closer, studying the equations carefully. Her business training allowed her to grasp some of it, and she was amazed by the complexity and elegance of the analysis. My God, Mom, this is incredible, she said, pride clear in her voice. Olivia, Victoria introduced herself. I'm Victoria Parker, the CEO of this company. Your mother just helped us avoid a mistake that could have cost millions. Olivia looked at her mother with a mix of pride and concern. And now, what happens next? That depends on your mother, Victoria replied. I've offered her a position on our financial analysis team. Olivia's eyes widened. Seriously? Seriously. But your mother needs time to think. Olivia turned to Emily. Mum, you can't say no to this. It's what you've always dreamed of. It's not that simple, sweetheart. There are complications. What complications? You're the smartest person I know. You deserve this chance. Emily looked at her daughter, seeing in her the confidence she herself had lost long ago. But what if I fail? What if I'm not good enough anymore? Mom, you spent 17 years helping me with math, teaching me to think logically, showing me how to solve complex problems. If that's not being good enough, I don't know what is. Victoria watched the interaction between mother and daughter with interest. She could see where Olivia had inherited her intelligence and determination. Olivia, Victoria said, can I ask you something? You're job hunting, right? I am. I've sent resumes to several companies but haven't heard back yet. How about starting here? We could offer you a trainee position in the administration department. That way, you and your mother could work at the same company. Olivia looked at her mother, her eyes shining with emotion. Mom, it's perfect. We could finally use our skills together. Emily felt like she was on an emotional roller coaster. In one morning, her life had completely changed. Victoria, can I have the rest of the day to think? Of course, but Emily, I want you to know this offer is genuine and permanent. I won't change it based on outside pressure or anyone else's opinions. Thank you. That means more to me than you can imagine. One last thing, Victoria added. Robert and Michael were very impressed with your work. Robert especially wants to learn more about your analysis methods. And Michael? Emily asked, remembering his initial hostility. Michael is proud, but he's not stupid. He recognizes competence when he sees it, even if he struggles to admit when he's wrong. Olivia took her mother's hand. Mom, should we go home and talk about this? Let's, Emily agreed. Before leaving, she turned to Victoria. Thank you for giving me a chance to be heard. Regardless of my decision, today was the first day in 17 years that I've felt like myself again. The feeling is mutual, Emily. It was a pleasure reconnecting with the person who inspired me to get where I am today. Mother and daughter left the room together, leaving Victoria alone with her thoughts. She looked at the boards filled with elegant, precise equations and smiled. She knew she had just rediscovered a treasure the academic world had lost to prejudice and politics. That evening, in the small apartment they shared in Queens, Emily and Olivia sat at the kitchen table to talk. It was the same table where Emily had spent countless nights studying while Olivia did her homework. Mom, can I be honest with you? Olivia said, preparing tea for both of them. Of course, sweetheart. I always knew you were wasting your talent. I'd see you solving complex math problems for fun, reading scientific papers like they were novels. I always wondered why you never tried to go back to academia. Emily sighed. Because I was afraid, Olivia. Afraid of being rejected again, afraid of finding out I'd lost my ability, afraid of letting you down if things went wrong. Mom, you've never let me down. Not once in my whole life. You worked tirelessly to give me everything I needed. But what if I take this opportunity and realize I can't handle the pressure? What if the other staff see me as the former janitor trying to act like an executive? Olivia took her mother's hands in hers. Mom, you're not the former janitor pretending to be an executive. You're the PhD in mathematics who worked as a janitor out of necessity but never stopped being who you truly are. Sometimes I wonder if I even remember who I really am. I know who you are. You're the woman who helped me with differential calculus in high school. You're the person who corrected my finance professor's mistakes in college. You're the mom who turned our living room into an office every night to keep studying, even after a full day of hard work. Emily felt tears forming in her eyes again. Do you really think I should accept? Mom, I think you should stop punishing yourself for something that wasn't your fault. You did the right thing exposing that fraud, and you were unfairly punished for it. But that doesn't mean you have to keep punishing yourself forever. What if people find out about my past and judge me? Then they're ignorant and don't deserve your respect. Mom, anyone who knows your full story can only admire you. Emily looked around the small kitchen that had been her reality for so many years. It was a home built with love and sacrifice, but also with limitations imposed by circumstances. "You know what scares me the most?" she said. "What?" "Hope. For 17 years, I've protected myself by expecting nothing beyond the basics. Now suddenly I'm being offered everything I've ever wanted, and I'm afraid it's too good to be true." "Mom, you deserve good things. You always have. The fact that it took this long doesn't mean it isn't real." Emily sipped her tea in silence, processing her daughter's words. Outside, she could hear the familiar sounds of the neighborhood where they'd built their modest but dignified life. "Olivia, if I accept, our lives will change completely. I know, and I'm ready for it. Actually, I'm more than ready. I'm excited. It won't be easy. I'll have to prove my worth every day. Some people will always see me as the cleaning lady who got lucky, and others will see you as the brilliant mathematician you've always been. Focus on those people, Mom." Emily smiled genuinely for the first time that day. When did you get so wise?" "I learned from the best teacher in the world, a woman who taught me that real education doesn't come from degrees or titles, but from constant curiosity and the courage to do the right thing, even when it's hard." "All right," Emily said, taking a deep breath. "I'll accept the offer." Olivia jumped from her chair and hugged her mother tightly. "Mom, I'm so proud of you. And I'm scared and excited at the same time." That's how you know you're making the right decision. That night, Emily barely slept. She lay staring at the ceiling, alternating between waves of anxiety and moments of pure joy. For the first time in 17 years, the future seemed full of possibilities instead of limitations. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps a lot for those of us just starting out. Now continuing. The next morning, Emily arrived at the company earlier than ever, but this time she wasn't wearing the blue cleaning uniform. She had chosen her best professional outfit, a grey suit she'd bought years ago for an interview that never happened. Victoria was waiting for her at reception. "Good morning, Emily. Sleep well?" "To be honest, I barely slept, but I've made my decision." "And what is it?" "I accept the offer, on one condition." Victoria smiled. "What condition?" "I want to keep getting to know everyone in the company, from cleaning staff to executives. If I'm going to work in data analysis, I need to understand all the human variables involved." "Condition accepted. In fact, it's an excellent idea." "And Olivia?" "She starts Monday in the trainee program. Robert was really excited when he heard about her background." Emily felt a wave of relief. "Victoria, I don't know how to thank you." "No need to thank me. You'll thank me by working hard and helping this company grow." "And Emily?" "Yes? Welcome back to the world that was always yours." Emily's first days in her new role were intense. Victoria had created a special position for her, Senior Quantitative Analysis Consultant. It gave her the freedom to work on various projects while reintegrating into the corporate world. Michael, who had initially been hostile, now regularly sought Emily out to discuss complex analyses. His pride had been replaced by genuine curiosity about her methods. "Emily," he said one Thursday afternoon, "can I ask you something?" "Of course, Michael. How did you keep your mind so sharp all these years? I go a week without practice and already feel rusty." Emily smiled. "Necessity, Michael. When you truly love something, you find a way to keep it alive, even in the toughest circumstances." "Do you feel any resentment for everything that happened?" It was a question Emily had asked herself many times. "I feel sadness for the lost time, but not resentment. Resentment would only poison my ability to enjoy this second chance." "You're a better person than I would be in your place." "It's not about being better or worse, Michael. It's about choosing how to respond to adversity." Robert, meanwhile, had almost become Emily's student. He constantly sought her out to learn her analysis methods and often praised her in department meetings. "Emily's methodology has revolutionized how we analyze risks," he said in a monthly meeting. "Our reports now have an accuracy we never achieved before." Olivia was also adapting well to the corporate environment. Her natural intelligence and the mathematical education she had received from her mother quickly made her one of the most promising trainees in the company. "Mum," she said during lunch together, "sometimes I watch you working and can hardly believe the change." "What do you mean?" "You're radiant. It's like you've come back to life." Emily reflected on her daughter's words. It was true. For the first time in 17 years, she felt complete, as if all the pieces of her identity had finally fallen into place. "You know what's the most amazing part?" Emily said. "I thought I'd lost my passion for numbers, but I discovered it was just dormant, waiting for the right moment to resurface." "And how does it feel to work with people who respect you for what you know instead of ignoring you?" "It's liberating and also scary. Sometimes I still expect someone to yell, 'This was all a mistake, go back to cleaning.' That's never going to happen, Mum. You've proven your worth for good." It was true. In her first few weeks, Emily had identified and corrected several errors in financial reports that could have cost the company dearly. Her analytical methods were saving resources and improving decision-making across all departments. But not everything was perfect. Some of the older employees still eyed her with suspicion, whispering in the halls about the janitor who became an executive overnight. Emily heard the comments but had learned not to let them affect her. "Let them talk," Victoria said when Emily mentioned the rumors. "The results of your work speak louder than any gossip. Sometimes it's hard to ignore." "Of course it is. But remember, small people always try to downplay big achievements because it makes them feel better about their own limitations." It was on a Tuesday, 3 months after her role change, that something extraordinary happened. Emily was in her office analyzing data when she received an unexpected call. "Dr. Emily Johnson?" said a male voice on the other end. "Yes, who's speaking?" "This is Dr. William Foster, head of the mathematics department at NYU. I'd like to speak with you about an important matter." Emily's heart raced. The university that had destroyed her career was calling her. "What exactly is this about?" "I'd prefer to discuss it in person. Would you be available to come here this week?" Emily hesitated. She wasn't sure she was ready to physically revisit the place where everything had fallen apart. "Can you give me any details?" "It's about the events from 17 years ago. We have some important revelations to share." The call ended, leaving Emily in shock. She called Olivia and Victoria to discuss what she should do. "You have to go, Mom," Olivia said firmly. "Whatever the reason for the call, you need to hear it." "What if it's some kind of trap? What if they want to humiliate me again?" "Then you walk out with your head held high like you always have," Victoria replied. "But Emily, something tells me that's not the case. After all this time, why would they do that?" 2 days later, Emily found herself walking through the familiar halls of NYU. It was strange to be back as a respected professional, instead of the outcast she'd been forced to become. Dr. Foster greeted her in a meeting room where other professors were already present. Emily recognized some faces, but noticed most of the people involved in her dismissal had retired or moved to other institutions. "Dr. Johnson," Dr. Foster said, "thank you for coming. I know it couldn't have been easy." "It really wasn't, but I'm here. I'll be direct. 6 months ago, an internal investigation uncovered concrete evidence of the fraud you reported 17 years ago." Everything you said was true. Emily felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. "What do you mean?" "Documents were found in the archives of retired professors. Emails, bank records, contracts with companies. Everything proves there was indeed manipulation of research data to favor commercial interests. And you've known this for 6 months and only now come to me." Dr. William lowered his head, ashamed. "We were trying to understand the full extent of the problem, and also preparing an appropriate way to apologize." "Apologies." "Dr. Johnson, the university acknowledges it made a grave mistake. You were wronged in an unacceptable way. We want to offer restitution." "What kind of restitution?" "First, a full public retraction. Second, the offer of a lifetime professorship with retroactive pay for the last 17 years. Third, an exclusive research fund for your projects." Emily fell silent for several minutes, processing the information. Part of her felt a bitter satisfaction at finally being vindicated. Another part felt anger for having lost 17 years of her career for nothing. "And the professors involved in the fraud?" she asked. 2 had already passed away. The other 3 were fired and are facing legal proceedings. Why did it take so long for the truth to come out? Because the people with the power to investigate back then were the same ones involved in the scheme. Only with the renewal of faculty and an external audit were we able to uncover everything. Emily stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the campus where she had spent the best years of her early career. Dr. Foster, I appreciate the honesty and the acknowledgement, but I need time to think about the offer. Of course, but may I ask why? I imagine this is what you've always dreamed of. Emily turned to face him. Because 17 years ago this was my dream. Today my life is different. I have commitments, responsibilities, people who depend on me. The offer has no expiration date. Thank you. I'll talk to my family and give you an answer in a few weeks. That evening, Emily told Olivia and Victoria everything. Their reactions were interesting and revealing. Mom, you have to accept, Olivia said immediately. It's your complete vindication. Not necessarily, Victoria said thoughtfully. Emily, what is your heart telling you? That I'm torn. Part of me wants to accept out of spite, to prove they were wrong. But another part of me has moved on and is happy where I am. And which part is stronger? Honestly, the part that's moved on. Victoria, I enjoy what I'm doing at the company. I like working on practical applications of math, seeing immediate results from my work. At the university, my research was more theoretical. Olivia looked surprised. Mom, you don't want to return to academia? Not the way it was before. Maybe I can do both. Combine practical work with research. How so? Victoria asked. I could accept the professorship part-time, teach some classes, mentor students, but keep my job at the company. It would be the best of both worlds. Victoria smiled. And you could use the company as a real-world lab for your academic research. Exactly. And I could bridge the gap between academia and the market, which has always been a problem in the United States. Olivia nodded slowly. Actually, Mom, I think that's even better than just returning to the university. You'd be creating something new. And I can help by funding research with practical business applications, Victoria added. Emily felt a growing excitement. It was a solution that would let her use all her experience in an integrated way. Do you think it could work? I think it could revolutionize how applied math is taught in the United States, Victoria said. And I think my mom is about to become the first person to turn an injustice into an opportunity, even greater than the original, said Olivia proudly. 2 weeks later, Emily returned to NYU with a counter-proposal. She would accept the part-time professorship, create an internship program connecting students with real companies, and develop applied research benefiting both academia and the market. This is an innovative proposal, said Dr. William Foster. We've never had an arrangement like this. Then it's about time we did. The United States needs more connection between research and practical application. And how would this work in practice? I'd teach 3 days a week at the university and work 2 days at the company. My graduate students would rotate internships across different firms, and my research would focus on solving real-world problems in the American market. Dr. William consulted the other professors present. After a few minutes of discussion, he returned with an answer. Accepted. In fact, I'm excited about the possibilities. And there's one additional condition, said Emily. What is it? I want full autonomy to choose my research projects and business partners. No external interference or pressure to favor any particular interests. Condition accepted. Then we have a deal. 6 months later, the program Emily created was revolutionizing NYU's mathematics department. Her students were landing jobs before graduation, her research was generating patents and innovative solutions, and companies nationwide were seeking partnerships. Olivia had been accepted into Emily's master's program, creating a unique dynamic of mother and daughter working together both at the company and the university. Mom, said Olivia one afternoon as they worked on logistics optimization research, do you realize you've turned your story from tragedy into triumph? How so? If you hadn't been wronged, you never would have worked as a cleaner. If you hadn't worked as a cleaner, you'd never have understood business operations the way you do now. And without that unique experience, you couldn't have created the program you're building today. Emily stopped writing and looked at her daughter. Are you saying everything happened for a reason? I'm saying you took something terrible that happened to you and turned it into something benefiting hundreds of people. That's more than resilience, Mum. That's transformation. Emily smiled, reflecting on the extraordinary journey she'd taken, from professor to cleaner, from cleaner to business consultant, and now combining it all into something entirely new. You know what's funniest, she said. What? All those years cleaning whiteboards, I never imagined I'd be writing on them again someday. But this time, I'm not just writing numbers, I'm writing possibilities. And what possibilities are those? To show that knowledge has no social class, to prove that practical experience and academic theory complement each other, to build bridges where there were once only walls. Olivia hugged her mother. I'm proud of who you've become. And I'm grateful for everything that happened, even the painful parts, because they brought me here. 2 years later, Emily was giving a lecture at the National Applied Mathematics Conference. Her presentation was titled, From Invisibility to Innovation, How Multidisciplinary Experience Transforms Academic Research. In the audience were business leaders, professors, students, and even some of the university's cleaning staff, whom she had personally invited. For a long time, she said into the microphone, I believed my career was over, that my years of education and my passion for numbers were things of the past. But I discovered that seemingly unrelated experiences can combine in unexpected ways to create something greater than the sum of their parts. Working as a cleaner, I learned about operational efficiency, the value of hard work, humility, and persistence. These lessons became just as valuable as my PhD for the work I do today. Most importantly, I learned that our professional identity doesn't define our worth as people. I'm the same person I was when I cleaned whiteboards and when I write on them. What changed was how the world sees me, not who I truly am. The audience gave her a standing ovation. Emily saw Olivia in the front row, Victoria a few rows back, and even Michael and Robert, who had traveled specially to hear her talk. After the presentation, a young student approached her. Professor Emily, I'm struggling financially and thinking about dropping out to work. Your story gave me hope that I can keep studying even while working. You absolutely can, Emily replied warmly. And who knows, the experiences you gain from working might enrich your academic perspective in ways you can't even imagine right now. You really believe that? I absolutely do. Some of my best insights didn't come from books or academic papers, but from conversations with co-workers or everyday observations. Thank you for inspiring me. Thank you for reminding me why I do what I do. That evening at the hotel, Emily and Olivia celebrated with a simple dinner. Mum, did you see people's faces when you mentioned your 17 years as a cleaner? I did. Some were shocked, others impressed, some uncomfortable. How did it feel? Free. For the first time, I could tell my whole story without shame or fear. And now, what's next? Emily smiled. Now it's about continuing to build bridges between academia and the workforce, between theory and practice, between people from different social backgrounds. There's so much work to be done, and I'll be right by your side every step of the way. I know, sweetheart, and that gives me strength beyond what you can imagine. End of story. Now, tell us what you thought of this story of perseverance and transformation. Do you believe Emily made the right decisions along her journey? Share your thoughts in the comments on how difficult experiences can turn into unique opportunities. If this story touched your heart, leave a like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other inspiring stories like this one.